Right. So, this is what generally yesterday I have discussed with you, which is all about data analysis process. In reference to the data analysis process, yesterday I have given you a high-level understanding over this, where these are the different stages will be there in data analysis. The first one is to define the questions carefully. Next, we need to establish the measuring priorities. So followed by collecting relevant data. Next, analyze and gather the data, followed by review and interpret the results, right? So these are the different process or stages which are there whenever we are working on the data analysis. Now, when it comes to the first one, let me write on it in the document, right? So this is where generally, data analysis process is all about. In reference to the data analysis process, the first one is to define questions carefully. Second, we need to establish the measuring priorities. Third, we need to collect relevant data. Fourth one is to analyze and gather data. Last but not least, review and interpret the results. Okay, these are the 5 steps which are involved in data analysis process. Now, if you understand the first one, which is called defining the questions carefully, right? This is what something we have taken. Now, when it comes to defining the questions carefully, here, this is where being a data analyst team, right, I'm writing the step procedures because this is something being a group activity you should understand, because data analysis is not, data analyst does not say single individual who will be performing all that, because there is a lot of data which is involved in any organization. There are team members who works on that. This is not something done by any single individual as separate, right? It's a group activity where responsibilities and all depends on the kind of experience as well as the kind of skill set which they have already. Okay. Now, when it comes to defining questions carefully, being a data analyst team, we need to understand why and what are we analyzing. Okay. First of all, we should have a clarity over this. This is the first thing. Second, we need to understand the following questions in this. Okay. First point. Is this for business performance or to know about the status of the organization? Yeah. right? So first of all, we should know, is this the business performance, or to know about the status of the organization which is existed. Okay, this is the first question where we need to have an answer first, right? Being a business analyst, we need to define the questions. Okay. Second, how much time will it be taking for us to perform data analysis? Again, in this, we must be knowing about how complex the data is. Okay, that is required, because whatever the timelines we required to perform data analysis, that is also depending on the complexity also, right? How much complex the data we have taken, because depends on organization to organization. Whatever the data we have taken may be varied. It will not be the same all the time, right? So data may change from time to time, right? So because there will be some complex data which is involved in it. Sometimes there may not be much complex data, right? So that may vary. So complexity of data is what something we have to be seen with. This is where generally how complex the data is. Next, who are involving in this process? We must be knowing, right? Who are involving in the process. Next, what are their roles and responsibilities? Because as I stated in the beginning, depends on the profile to profile, depends on the experience what people carry, whatever the roles and responsibilities they manage will be different. It will not be the same for all the cases, right? Because what are the roles and responsibilities are they performing, which may be different from one to another. It will not be the same for all the projects, right? So because if you are working for an IT company, you are providing a solution for one of your customers. Okay, that's all something the perception here. But at the same time, whenever we are doing data analysis within the organization, let's say you are one of an employee working in the organization where you want to perform this, then whatever the responsibilities do we have and all everything will be something different. So what are their roles and responsibilities is also one of the key and important element we have to be seen with, right? Who are involving in the process, what are their roles and responsibilities, all that. Next, we must be knowing about the end result, right? Means what must be the end result? What must be the end result? Next, what kind of information we require to gather? What kind of information we require to gather? Next, what are the risks, assumptions, and dependencies involved while performing data analysis, whatever the kind of tools we use, right? So what are the risks which is involved in it? right? Risk can be, it can be usually it's an technical risk, I can say, right? So it depends on the complexity of data, what we have taken and all that. Followed by the kind of regulatory standards, because normally what happens whenever we want to perform the data analysis, one of the major challenges is accessibility of data. Because all servers from the client location or within our company. For example, we are working for healthcare projects or healthcare organization we are working. Whatever the data which is involved in healthcare organizations, the data is not something accessible in all the times. Accessibility matters from organization to organization because it will not be the same for all the projects, right? So because accessibility of data is something different from one to another, it will not be the same. Because especially when we follow healthcare projects, as I told you, the kind of server we are managing, right? Whatever the server are we managing, those servers are highly encrypted servers. There won't be any acceptance for any other external party or external team members to access the data, because due to the regulatory standards, policies and procedures, due to the security reasons and all, we may not have an accessibility to access the data, right? So that is also one of the context which we have to be taken into consideration, right? So if you want to perform data analysis, we need to understand what risk is being involved in it. At the same time, we must be knowing about the kind of assumptions which are involved in it, right? What are the different assumptions we need to keep into consideration? What are the assumptions do we have, right? So what are the dependencies do we have, right? So all these things is what something we have to know. This is where generally assumptions come into picture. What are the assumptions do we have and all of them, right? Assume that we are, whatever the data available with us is something accurate, for example, right? That is what one of the assumption, because whatever the data available with us must be accurate, then only there will be a value, right? So because if there is, because even though you are analyzing the data must be correct. I mean to say that the results, as long as the results were not so correct, for example, results data is not correct data, right? So even though you have done the data analysis and whatever the results you have identified will be of no use, right? There will be no value for that. So ensure that when you are understanding the assumption in reference to data analysis we do in the beginning, we should understand and assume that whatever the data we are taking is something accurate. Okay. Next, dependencies. We have to see the dependencies also. Whatever the data we have taken and what way it is connecting to the dependencies. I will give you an example from the retailing sector point of view. Let's say you want to know about the inventory status of a retail store. At the same time, you want to know how frequent we want to order goods to the manufacturer. Now, which data is available with you? As of now, what was the quantity, especially in the inventory system we have? That is the quantity which is available to you. Okay. But for what purpose you are doing, what is the end result here? You want to know the end result, how frequent we want to order goods to the manufacturer. End of the day, that was the result. Now, on what basis this will be identified? This is identified based on the sales happened within the organization. How much sales happened within the organization? Based on that, this will be performed. Right? So, when we are working being a business analyst, when we are working as a data analyst, whenever we are working on dependencies point of view, whenever we have access the data, right? Whenever we are accessing the data in context to the inventory system or inventory data we have taken. Based upon the end results, what are the dependencies, how much sales happened, and what products are moving faster, which product is moving slower. That sort of understanding is required, right? So this is where generally dependency come into picture. Why dependency? Because end result is how frequent we have to order goods to the manufacturer. That is the end result. If you want to address the end result, what is that required? You need to understand the dependency in that. This is what and how. Usually these are the questions which we have to define so that we will be knowing this carefully, right? So these are the questions we have to know first. Next, once we have known all these questions, next we need to establish the measuring priorities. Okay, what is meant by measuring priority? Measuring priorities based on multiple things, because measuring priority means what kind of priority items are we taking? Because if you remember, if you can go back to the business analysis, or if you are going for quality analysis, if you remember, when we want to manage the requirements or when we want to do the quality analysis, all that, what is that we did? This is where generally there is a technique which normally earlier we used to call prioritization technique. Am I right? Prioritization technique. This prioritization technique is what something will be identified by us. So based on three grounds, right? One is high priority. Second is intermediary. The third one is called low priority. Am I right or not? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Right. So priority items will be varied. Okay. Because even though we are working on to the role of a BA or a quality analyst or a data analyst, we have to establish the priorities first, right? How to measure the priorities is what something we have to see. So measuring of priorities based on technique which is called high priority items, intermediary and low, right? So that's the reason why this will be categorized into high, intermediary and low. Okay, this is how generally the priority is what something we do, right? So high priority items or high priority of data, whatever the required data in reference to the high priority is what something we do. Do remember, this is how something will be done in the background. You don't see it on the front screen, because in the front screen, whatever the actions are we performing is all about the data what we have taken, right? So edit, update, right? All that. This is all something we do. But whatever the process I am explaining to you, whatever the process are we following, this is all something happens in the back of that. Because see, what kind of data you have taken means, let's say for example, some X data you have taken. On what basis the X data was taken by you? The X data was taken by you based on the high priority, right? So as you feel that it's a high priority, hence you have taken it. Agreed, right? So in that context, whenever we are working on the priorities, these priority items will be categorized into three different parts. High priority data will be taken into first category. Second will be taken intermediary priority, whatever the priority in reference to the intermediary is concerned, right? That's all something comes under the intermediary priority. The third one about low priority, right? So whatever the priority items we have taken into consideration is all something comes under low priority, right? High priority items as separate, intermediary priorities as separate, low priorities will be as separate, right? This is how generally establishing and measuring priorities is what something we have to be performed it, right? This is point number 2. Next, we need to collect the relevant data, right? So if you want to collect the relevant data, first of all, we must be knowing about from where are we accessing this, whose permission is required. Next, what kind of data are we collecting? Next, we must be knowing about the size of data, because whenever we want to collect the relevant data, first of all, we should know the relevancy. So if you want to know about the relevancy, you must be knowing about from where are we accessing it, because we have to see the relevancy when we are working on the project, when it comes to the data analysis part is concerned. So we must be having a clear understanding about from where are we accessing this. Is this we are accessing from our own websites? So that we'll be knowing about the reliability, right? Relevance of data based on the reliability, because this information normally we have to gather from our internal sources. So then only the accuracy will come into picture, right? So for example, if some data which is available outside without having any authenticity, assume that, right? So assume that there was no authenticity as such. You are taking a data doesn't have any value because you don't know the accuracy of the data, what you have taken. But if that is the data you are taking within the organization, there will be some authenticity is there. There is some people who generally authorize the data, whatever is there is accurate or not. For example, if you have taken reports, right? So point of sale system reports, right? So sales reports are the actual reports. How much sales happened? Which product is selling faster, right? How much sales happened on a particular time or a particular day? Right? All these things we'll be knowing in that context, right? So from where are we accessing this data is also one of the key element we have to be seen with. Next, whose permission is required? Okay, that is also required. From who is going to give us the permission is also one of the key element we have to see, right? Whose permission is required here is also one of the key element is what something we have to be seen with. Right, so from where we are accessing the data is what something we have to be known with, right? So accessing the data depends on the data which is available, right? In the servers itself, we are accessing all the data, right? So this is where generally the first point, when it comes to the accuracy is concerned, everything. So this is one thing which we have to be having a clarity. Next, whose permissions are required? This is where I told you about the risks and as well as assumptions. If you remember in the beginning of the session, when I'm explaining about the first point I told you, right? So what are the assumptions? What are the risks which is involved, right? So what are the priority items I told you, right? So because we must be knowing about the people who is going to provide us the permission is what something we have to be known with. So if you don't know the people who is going to provide you the permission to collect the relevant data, then there will be no value for the authenticity, right? So if you want to know about the authenticity of it, we must be knowing about whose permission is required here, right? So this is also one of the key element we have to be focused on. Next, what kind of data are we collecting, right? So because means what kind of data means, is it that we are collecting the data of the customer data? Is it an employee data? Or is it an inventory level data, right? What kind of data are we collecting? Next, the size of the data also. Because what will be the size of the data? Depends on the size of the data. What were the level of data analysis we want to develop? or whatever the level of data analysis we want to make and all everything will be understood by us very clear. This is where generally size of data come into picture. What is the size of data? Right? How much size of the data is something available with us? This is all something we have to know. This is where generally size of data came into picture. So what kind of data are we collecting? We must be knowing about the size of data as well. So this is also one of the key and prominent element we have to be focused when we are collecting the relevant data, right? Next, last but not least, we must be knowing about the data format, right? In which format data are we collecting on? Normally, whenever we do the data collection, usually this data collection based on the Excel. I'll show you. There is some sample of Excel I have. For example, this is where generally furniture price prediction, right? This is what the data I have taken, right? So this is how generally the data usually available, right? On an Excel, usually whatever the data we see, everything is on Excel sheet, right? So this is what generally the data will be there, right? So at the same time, if you want to know about employee sample employee data, right? Right. So this is where generally we'll be mentioning the employee ID number, right? So what was the name of the person, right? So what was the title, which department these people are belongs to. At the same time, we must be knowing about which department these people and what are the specializations, gender, at the same time, ethnicity, at the same time, what was their age, right? At the same time, when we have hired them, at the same time, what will be their annual salary, right? So what was the bonus are we giving to them, right? So which country are they belongs to, right? At the same time, which day, which city they belongs to, right? So when will be the expiry date, right? So this is all generally the data in reference to the employee sample data is what something I have taken. So a data will be somewhere in the Excel format. Of course, this is the fields are completely 1001. Okay, 1001 is what generally the data I have taken here. 1001 fields, right? 1001 numbers, I can say, or more or less, like that's how it is. So when we are working on the implementation in reference to the data we are gathering and all, we must be knowing about the format of data. What is that we have taken? What kind of format of data is what something we have taken is what something we have to be known with. Next, analyzing the gathering the data, right? So what kind of data, what kind of tools are we using it? What kind of tools are we using to analyze the data? So once we have gathered, because collecting all the relevant data, so whenever we have collected and gathered the data and all that, what kind of tools are we going to analyze the data is all something we have to do. As I told you, there are tools like SQL, which will be used to write queries and all that. So that if you want to extract the data, right? So for the report generation and all, SQL and all everything is what something we use. At the same time, Python programming language is also required for us. So when we want to become a data analysis or analyst, knowing about Python programming is also required. So what kind of tools are we going to use and all everything is all something will be involved in this. Next, review and interpret the results. Means how and in what way are we reviewing the information? Okay. Next, what is the source of process uh, to review the results? Next, how to interpret the results. Next, is there any process do we follow to do so? Okay, these are all something which we have to do, right? So if you want to review and interpret the results and all that, So we must be knowing about how and in what way are we reviewing the information. At the same time, what is the source of process to review the results? That process we must be knowing. At the same time, how to interpret the results? Is there any process to be followed to do so? Right? So is there any process of interpreting the results and all? So because this interpretation of the results, which will be converted as a recommendations in the business, right? So this is where generally recommendations come into picture. We do the recommendations to the customer. So based on the recommendations, whatever the decisions are they going to take in coming days, and what decisions are we going to take and all everything is what something will be done by the mm, uh, business people or business owners or someone, right? So if they want to do it, so based on the recommendations what we have given, because interpretation of the results will be converted as a recommendation. Recommendations will be useful to take any business decisions and all everything in further in the organizations. So this is where generally the data analysis process and as well as the steps which normally we will be following whenever we are working on the data analysis. This is all something which will happen in the back of that, right? So whatever finally will be there with us is the data. Okay, data is what something we have to know. And before the data, even we must be knowing about some configuration of the tools also. That is not relating to DA role, because being a business and data analyst we are working on, we must be knowing about how to extract, how to install it and all. So that sort of basics is something required. That's all something to learn, right? So it is minimum basic. If you know, it is more better, because so that is one thing. After that, how to what data we have taken and how we are extracting all that. That's all something this which being a data analyst we do it. Okay, this is all something which is all comes under data analysis process is all about. Is this clear?